Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Q2 Stewardship Seminar. I have Eric Williams here with us. If you haven't already, please take a moment to mute yourself so we have no distractions while Eric is presenting. I'm going to let a few more people in. People are actively joining, and we will get started on time. So unfortunately, this is something that is very common. I know many of you see this in the news every single day, and I wanted to have this topic presented on because I think all organizations can better themselves when it comes to training of their staff and how to manage something like this should this happen. And I think we always think, oh, this could never happen to me, or this could never happen to our organization. But Eric will say, this can happen to anyone at any point in time. And so I hope you find this seminar to be of value. I'm going to take a moment to introduce Eric and give you a brief overview of his background, and then I'm going to turn things over. I do encourage you to ask questions. You can ask those questions via the chat box down below, and I will relay those questions to Eric throughout the presentation. So, Eric Williams has worked as a Texas peace officer since 2005. He's worked as a sheriff's deputy in both the Garza and Hutchinson County Sheriff's Departments and the Texas Tech University Police Department. Eric has been the chief of police in Idalou, Texas since February of 2020. Eric has traveled across the state teaching active shooter threat response trainings to schools, churches, businesses, and hospitals. Eric firmly believes that the more training and preparation that individuals and organizations can do, the harder the threat will be. The more individuals that are trained and prepared, the harder the target for the business, church, school, hospital, and community. This training will save lives. So thank you again so much for taking time out of your day. I know your time is precious, and I'm going to hand things over to Eric for him to begin.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. And I appreciate you, Elizabeth, for having me here. As Elizabeth said, my name is Eric Williams. I am the chief of police in Idalou. Guys, I've been doing this training for the general public since about 2007. So for 3 years, starting in 2016, I did this as a full-time gig, basically, where I traveled around the state teaching active shooter response training and self-defense training, firearms training to mainly rural schools and hospital staff, as well as businesses and churches. So I've been doing this for a long time. And quite honestly, the teaching of this doesn't get any easier. And the reason why that is because the phenomenon of these active shooter events goes on and on. Things are not letting up. So I want to preface this training to say this. The most important aspect of surviving an active shooter event is your participation. Okay. So what that means is you can hire security guards. You can have off-duty police officers that might be at your facility or your church or your school or whatever. Okay. But it's probably not going to be enough when the moment happens. So I want you to keep in mind as we're going through this training, above and beyond all things, is to take this seriously and don't outsource your safety to anyone else. Okay. And I say that as a police officer, a career police officer. Don't outsource your safety to the police department. Don't outsource your safety to the security guard. You've got to take charge of your own safety. Okay. So I'd like for you to just keep this in mind as we go through this. This is a 1-hour presentation. Guys, this is only a fraction of the actual training that I normally do. Most of this training right here is actually hands-on. The PowerPoint that you're going to be getting today, it's just setting the basics for what we would normally do in the hands-on presentation. So let's get this kicked off. Guys, I welcome questions along the way. and we'll see where this goes. So let me make sure I can move my slide. There we go. All right, so why are we here today, guys? Like I said, don't outsource your safety to anyone else, okay? And my mission, my sole mission here today is to primarily prompt that in you for you to take charge of your own safety and the safety of your families, the safety of your organization, your facility, wherever you may be. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of my credentials. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm a certified SWAT officer. I'm a certified instructor for law enforcement, for tactical training and SWAT. So I've gotten the opportunity over the years to train with a tremendous amount of other officers and agencies around the state of Texas, as well as military trainers. There's a large cross-pollination that goes on between in the tactical world between police and military units. So I've gotten the benefit of being able to train with some of the most top-notch trainers in our nation. So and what I do is I take that stuff, I package it up, and I bring that to you guys because it will that very training, even though you may not be in the military, you may not be a police officer or even affiliated with those worlds, you can still benefit from that training. Okay, so some of the things we're going to talk about and learn here today. We're going to talk about what an active shooter is. And you probably already have a pretty good idea of what that is, because all you have to do is turn on your television or your news feed, and you'll see another active shooter event that's happened in this country, you know, weekly, if not almost every day. We're going to learn some early warning signs of an active shooter, and these things are key. After every one of these events, and you've probably heard it on the newscast, they're interviewing a neighbor or a friend or somebody that knew the shooter. And there were always things that were popping up in people's minds that they noticed about the shooter, but nobody said anything about it. And these things that people were noticing were actually warning signs. Okay, so we're going to learn what some of those are. And of course, the biggest majority of this, you're going to learn what to do when it actually happens. Okay, and that is very important. Guys, what is the motivation to be here today? Okay, guys, I am simply here to arm you. Okay, I'm here to arm you. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to pass out guns. Okay, and some of you may be shooters, some of you may not be shooters. So I'm not here to put weapons in your hand. What I'm here to do is to arm this, the human brain, the M1A1 Mod 0 human brain. That is the most important weapon system you have. You may have a Glock, you may have an AR-15, you may have a shotgun, whatever the case may be. But unless you're prepared, guys, right here to use whatever weapon system you have, it's not going to do you any good. Okay, so that's what I'm here to do, is to arm you. You're here to learn how to live, because in an active shooter event, that is the prime directive, is for you, your family, your friends, your coworkers to walk out of here alive. Okay, that's the whole objective of this. All right, let's take a look at our priority of life skill. Okay, guys, I put this up here for a simple reason, because I want you to understand some things from a law enforcement perspective. Guys, when we take our brand new officers, our brand new rookie officers, we put them out in the patrol car with their field training officer, and we teach them, you know what, the most important thing you can do at the end of every shift is to go home safe to your families. And that's a reasonable thing, right? We want our guys and gals going home safe to their families. But when we put them into that tactical environment, especially in an active shooter or hostage rescue, something like that, that shifts. So the most important people that we care about going home safe to their families become the civilians, the hostages, the victims, potential victims. That would be you guys going about your daily business, going to the office, going to the grocery store, going to the gym, the school, whatever the case may be. We want you guys going home alive first. Okay. Only secondly are we concerned with other police officers, EMS, or firefighters. All right. Now, obviously, we have seen some catastrophic failures in this. And I'm thinking of Uvalde as one of those examples where there were colossal failures of leadership and training that led those officers to really have a very bad priority of life, where it didn't work and a lot of kids and teachers got killed. But that's generally how we teach people. Civilians first, police, EMS, and fire second. Our suspects or our shooters, honestly, guys, we don't care that much about them. If we can catch them alive, they're going to go to jail. Otherwise, they're going to go to the morgue. Okay. Property is never a concern when lives are at stake. Okay. We'll jack up doors, windows, cars, whatever it is we need to do to get into that facility to stop that shooter. And you should have that in your mind too. I know in this facility that I'm sitting in right now, Sanford and Tatum, it's a beautiful facility. Okay. Lots of money was put into this facility to make it nice. But when I did the training here a couple of weeks ago, we talked about, could you break windows? Could you go through a sheetrock wall, break into a sheetrock wall if you needed to get out of that environment where that shooting was going on? Absolutely. Don't be concerned with property. It's okay to break things if you're having to get out from where you're needing to get out from. We can replace property. We can't replace lives. And that little phrase right there, you're going to see it at the bottom of your screen. It says, stop the killing and stop the dying. Okay. That is the words that we live by in the tactical active shooter world. Okay. Stop the killing means we're going to stop the shooters. Okay. And notice I say shooters, plural. It could be more than one. If you have one shooter, you should always assume that there could be another until it's otherwise proven so. All right. So we stop the shooters, we stop the killing. And when we talk about stopping the dying, what that means is applying very rapid first aid on those people that have been shot or stabbed or whatever the case may be, stopping the bleeding. All right. And if you have not been through some kind of stop the bleed class, stop the bleed training, it is incredibly important that you guys get into that training. It's going to teach you how to stop major arterial bleeds from the arms and the legs, how to treat injuries, to the torso areas, the head areas, to save lives. And why that is so important is because, especially in an active shooter event, you may have a large scene, and it's going to take a little while for those medics to be able to come into that facility. If we have, say, an active shooter event at Sanford and Tatum, this building right here is a large building. So those first officers that get there, their most important job that they have to do is to hunt down that shooter or shooters and make sure that they are neutralized, make sure that they're not a threat anymore. Okay. Then they have to make sure that there's not another shooter hiding somewhere in the building. So they have to clear the whole building. So we're talking matters of minutes. Okay. Average national response time to 911 is 4.5 minutes. So let's say 4.5 minutes for the officers to get there, to get inside, to take care of the shooter. That could be another 5 to 10 minutes. And then to clear out the building, a building this size would probably be another 10 to 15 minutes. Well, if you get shot, say in a brachial artery or femoral artery, you've got maybe 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes to take care of that bleed before that person bleeds out and is dead. Okay. So that's why it's so important to get into the stop the bleed training. And if you cannot find a stop the bleed class or instructor in your area, please contact me, because I will provide that training for you guys. So, but it's incredibly important that you do that. All right, let's take a look at the actual definition of what an active shooter is. And I want you to read this with me. I just want to point out a couple of things. This was put out a couple of years ago by the National Tactical Officers Association. So I'm just going to read it to you. It's one or more subjects who participate in a random or systematic shooting spree demonstrating their intent to continuously harm others. All right, this is not the guy that's, he's mad at, the guy at the gas station because he feels shorted, so he shoots him and leaves. Okay, it's not a one-time event. It's a continuing situation. They're going to shoot multiple people. All right. This can take place in a confined or a populated area. And the active shooter's overriding objective appears to be that of mass murder. Okay, they're not here to steal purses, laptops, money. They're here to kill people. All right. So it appears to be that of mass murder rather than other criminal conduct such as robbery, kidnapping, things like that. And includes any assault with a weapon that's capable of causing mass homicide. Now, we talk a lot about guns, right? After every one of these shootings, what do we hear people screaming about? Politicians, media, blah, blah, blah. Oh, if we just get rid of the guns, everything will be okay. Not so, all right? These things can take place with somebody with a knife, a box cutter, a machete, a club of some kind. You can have a mass casualty event with anything. One of the things that keeps me up at night sometime is somebody with a garden sprayer full of gasoline and a cigarette lighter, using fire as a weapon. Any of those things are capable of causing mass homicide. All right. Now, typically, at least here in the United States, it's usually with a firearm. Okay. So that's why we call it active shooter. But I don't want you to get, too wrapped around the axle thinking this is just about guns, because it's not. It could be any type of weapon. All right, now let's take a look at some of the characteristics of these shooters. First of all, guys, these guys desire to kill or seriously injure other people, and they have no concern for their own safety. All right. They know today is zero day for them. They know they're going to die today. They're just here to take out as many people as they possibly can before they go out. They're going to systematically search out and destroy victims. Okay, so what that means is they know who they're going to kill first. They have a list. Typically, that's how these guys do it. The typical personality of the active shooter is that of an injustice collector. And so an injustice collector is somebody, and you probably may know somebody like this that you've encountered in your life. Somebody that never takes responsibility for the problems in their own life. They're always blaming other people. Every perceived slight against them or insult against them, somebody could be joking with them, and they take it very deeply personally as an insult. And they never forgive, and they never forget. And those are the people that they put on their list, and they're going to go after first. Okay, there's some kind of perceived grievance that they're going to execute vengeance upon. All right, they're going to search out and destroy those people first. Anybody else who happens to get in the way, for them, that's just bonus points. Now, they're not going to stop searching and destroying until they're stopped by law enforcement. Okay, suicide, and guys, generally suicide, that's how these things end. Once these shooters get pressed, when the officers are coming in, or another citizen or somebody pressing them to stop the shooting, most of the time these people kill themselves rather than risk getting captured. Okay. Or other intervention. If you see that phrase, other intervention. So what that means is, guys, that would be you taking care of yourself, your family, your organization, your friends, coworkers, and doing something to stop the shooting. Okay. And we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of that here in just a few minutes. Now, typically these active shooters don't have a criminal history. So what that means is, law enforcement wise, generally they're not even on our radar. They've never been arrested before. We don't know who they are until we get there to identify them. Now, psychiatric problems and med use, and what I mean by med use, that would be prescription meds. All right. Psychiatric problems and med use are extremely common in these shooters. All right. Now, whether they're not taking enough of a medication or too much of it or not the right medication, that's something for the psychiatrist to decide. But when they do the toxicologies on these shooters, they usually find cocktails of these different prescription medications in addition to their psychiatric history. People have asked me before, well, Eric, can we profile these shooters to see, who they might be before we hire them or before we let them in school or whatever the case may be? And the FBI for years has tried to really pin that down to try to be able to profile who these people might be. The problem is the population of these shooters is very diverse. They come from all different races and religions, socioeconomic backgrounds. Used to, we could say that they're almost always male, but we've had some female active shooters. But they do share some common characteristics, okay? And like I said before, these people are injustice collectors. So in their minds, they're being harassed, persecuted at work, school, wherever they may happen to be, right? they perceive that their character or their status is being attacked repeatedly, and that the problems are not being resolved by the people that are in control. Okay. So I want you to think about this, because probably a lot of you that are on this presentation might be supervisors in your respective organizations, or maybe a teacher, whatever the case may be. So guys, take it seriously when someone comes to you and says, hey, you know what? I'm tired of these people gossiping about me all the time, or I'm tired of the practical jokes being played upon me, or things of that nature. We have an obligation when it comes down to it for the safety of the people that are under us, okay? The people that are put into our sphere of control. So when people are coming to you with those kind of, grievances or accusations, take it seriously and do what you can to stop that stuff, because you may actually be heading off somebody who, in their mind, if they don't think things are being taken care of by the people in control, they might feel justified in their mind to take matters into their own hands. Okay. Now, some of these people, they'll suffer in silence. We'll never know what set them off until the deed is done. Maybe we'll get the manifesto that some of these shooters leave. Maybe we won't. They'll just come in and do the deed one day. But it kind of rolls like this. The person begins to develop what's called persecutory ideation. And basically that means they're dwelling on the fact that they're being picked on, harassed, gossiped about, whatever in their minds, right? They begin blame projection. Yeah, she said this about me. He was gossiping about me. They're going on the list, right? And then violent revenge fantasies, and the plan is hatched from there. Now let's look at some of the possible early warning signs. Now, guys, this list that's right here in front of you is not exhaustive. Okay, these are just highlights. All right, but these are big highlights. Now, I don't want you to take these things in isolation of each other either. But if you see 2 or 3 of these things manifesting in someone's life, those should be big red flags for you. Okay, you might want to really consider about getting them some help. So let's talk about the first one: changes in dress, speech, or expressions. All right. Now, what that doesn't mean, that would be like somebody going and changing their dress style. Maybe, they went to Dillard's or whatever and bought a new outfit, or maybe they're trying a new haircut, something like that. What I do mean by this would be people that completely quit taking care of themselves. And we run into this in law enforcement, honestly, more than we would like. We'll get what's called a welfare check. And, we'll have somebody that calls and says, hey, can you guys go check on Uncle Jim? He's not acting right, or we can't get a hold of him. So we'll go over to Uncle Jim's house, ring the doorbell. Maybe after 10 minutes, Uncle Jim comes to the door, and then we figure out real quick something's not right with Uncle Jim. Number one, he's sitting in the dark because he hadn't paid his electric bill. Power gets turned off. Uncle Jim may not have taken a shower, for the past 2 weeks. Very few groceries in Uncle Jim's house. Something is going on with Uncle Jim. Okay. If you see somebody that suddenly there's a change, or even gradually there's a change in their work product, maybe if they're in school, their grades just go downhill. Normally a good work ethic, you start having real problems with them. There's some issues going on there. Okay, so be aware of those changes. They can be gradual or abrupt. So if you have some kind of employee assistance program, some kind of counseling that's available, that's where you might want to start getting some intervention into these people's lives. The second item: increased agitation or anxiety, isolation, and depression. Okay, these are big indicators right here. Now, we all have stress in our life. When we talk about agitation, anxiety, I don't know about you, but around the Lubbock area, we have crazy drivers around here. And when they're flying around the loop or out on the highway and they're getting right up on you and tailgating, it can really start agitating you, right? There's a lot of just angst in society right now for multiple reasons. And we all know that, and we all deal with it every day. But somebody who is lashing out, threatening people, borderline violent behavior or outright violent behavior or outburst, that's a big red flag, guys. That means somebody is not being able to handle that agitation and anxiety very well. Isolation, that would be kind of like the opposite of that agitation. Somebody who all of a sudden they just shut down. They're withdrawing from their normal group of friends, coworkers, whatever it might be, or family. That's another indicator. Depression. Okay. Now everybody deals with depression at some point in their lives. And really it can be lots of things can affect it. Seasons of life can affect it. The actual climatic seasons can affect it. Sometimes cloudy weather can make people a little bit blue. But if you think back to any psychology course you might have ever had, everybody kind of operates on a baseline. Okay. So some days you're a little above the baseline, you're cooking, everything's good. Hey, it's Friday, I'm going out of town, whatever the case may be, things are good. Man, you hit Monday morning, going back to work, and you're like, oh, so you go down below the baseline, it's like, man, this just bites. Well, that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is somebody, they're on that baseline up and down, and all of a sudden they bottom out. And I mean, they go way down and they can't get back out of that trough. All right. Everything starts suffering. It could be almost to the point of paralysis because of that depression. That's a big indicator, guys. That's where somebody really needs help. Substance abuse. Hey, let's be honest. We live in a substance abuse rich society. Okay. And I'm talking, the most popular way of self-medicating is alcohol. All right. And prescription meds and illicit drugs, and sometimes a combination thereof. All right. So substance abuse is very common in our society. But if you see someone coming to work, school, drunk, high, under the influence, whatever the case may be, that is not normal behavior. Okay. That person needs some intervention. Preoccupation with death and violent acts. This is huge, guys. Somebody who is expressing an overt desire to hurt other people or harm themselves, having a real fascination with violence, violent acts, those are gigantic indicators. Make sure that you are doing, and if there's nothing you feel like you can do with like an employee assistance program or anything like that, just call 911 and let the officers come out and talk with that person. Because we do have ways that we can take somebody to the hospital if we think that they are a threat to themselves or other people. Okay. And the last one I want to talk about is violent video games. And, this is a controversial subject, but I want to point out something here about violent video games. There's been a lot of research done into the effects of violent video games on the human brain, and especially in young people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because in police circles and military circles, we use video media to train officers and military guys on using deadly force or not. Okay. And the reason why we use that video media is because as they're going through these life-size video scenarios where they're going to actually have to shoot someone or not shoot someone, we're actually programming into their minds to be able to point that weapon at somebody and pull the trigger. There is normally an innate something within people that deep down they know that taking another human life is not good. Okay. But there are times when it's necessary, as we know, and that could be in wartime. That could be like in the law enforcement world, or a self-defense type of thing. Somebody's trying to attack you. You may have to take a human life. Well, in those video scenarios that we use to train officers and soldiers, we're actually programming into them the ability to do that with a lot less of that internal resistance. Now, in that training, we're putting in the legal and moral safeguards that they need to know when it's okay to take a human life or not. Now, get this. The violent video games, the first-person shooter games that anybody can go to Walmart or Best Buy or whatever and buy off the shelf or download on your computer, those kids, and especially kids, because they're the biggest fans of them, that play those games, they're being programmed as well. They are being programmed with every pull of that trigger or that console stick, whatever it is they're using, to lessen the resistance in their minds to taking a human life. Okay. But my question is this, are they being given the legal and moral safeguards when they know taking a life, when it's okay to take a human life or when it's not? All right. That's a question for you to decide. Now, I'm not saying that if your son or daughter or your grandma, whoever plays violent video games, are they going to be the next active shooter? I'm not saying that. But the interesting thing is that almost every one of these shooters, almost every one of them, when they start looking into the backgrounds and dissecting the backgrounds of these shooters, they find out they are fanatics, and I mean fanatics, of violent first-person shooter games. So I just throw that out there as food for thought. So keep that in mind.
So Eric, we have received a question that relates to that. So I thought I would interject if you don't mind, so you can address that.
Yeah.
So when you indicate get some help, who should we call if they don't have an EAP program or if the family is negligent in one's opinion?
Okay. What I would do if you don't have any kind of EAP program, I would go ahead and contact your local law enforcement. In law enforcement now, especially in Texas and especially since the Uvalde shootings, law enforcement agencies across the state are coalescing to put together teams of individuals to assess threats to any given community in Texas. So if there's somebody that needs somebody to talk to them and to find out what's going on, just go ahead and contact your local law enforcement agency.
Thank you.
You bet. Okay, so let's take a look at this next slide here. The reason why I put this up here, guys, for those of you who don't know, this is the tower, the clock tower at the University of Texas in Austin, okay? And the reason why I put this up here is because back in 1966, an event happened there, which we classified as the first, what we called an active shooter here in the United States, okay? Now, there had been mass shootings before in the US, but this one in 66 was what we really classified as the kickoff of the phenomenon of active shooter in America. So you can tell 66, that was a long time ago. So this thing has been around, this phenomenon has been around for a while, all right? 1966, a guy named Charles Whitman, he was a former Marine. This guy had some excellent training. He was a great marksman, climbed up in the tower, and that tower is 28 stories tall, got out on the observation deck, which you see in that slide, which is right under the clock. All right, that if any of you have ever been there, you will know that this is a huge structure, limestone structure. It's almost like a castle. All right. So Whitman got in. He had several guns with him, some rifles. He had some food and water too. He got down in one of those little holes that you see down below the clock. Those are really drainage holes that rain runs out of when it rains up there, right? He got himself into one of those little loopholes and he opened fire. And he ended up killing 15 and wounding 31 there at UT, all right, on campus and in the surrounding area around campus. Now, the reason why I put this up here is because in 1966, law enforcement was not ready for this type of phenomenon. UT did not even have its own police department at the time. So when Whitman got out there and started shooting, you had Austin PD and the Texas Department of Public Safety show up, because literally the Capitol is right down the street from this. You can see the Capitol quite well from this observation deck. They showed up and started returning fire on Whitman. Now, back in 1966, most officers were not armed with rifles. They had quite honestly, if you've ever seen the Andy Griffith show and Barney with his little 38 caliber Smith & Wesson, that was the Glock pistol of the day, okay? A 6-shooter. So they got there and they're shooting back at Whitman with shotguns and 6-shooters. And he's 28 stories up in a solid limestone structure. They were doing nothing to be able to stop him. So they actually had to get on the local AM radio station, Austin PD did, and ask for deer hunters who might be in the downtown Austin area to bring deer rifles down to UT so they could put effective fire on this guy. And that's what they did. You see right below the clock in that picture, there looks like a cloud of dust. That was a bullet strike that day when those rounds were being sent up there. If you ever get an opportunity to go, take a pair of binoculars with you and stand down at the foot of that tower and look up at the clock area. And what you will see in the facade where those little loopholes are, you'll still see bullet holes there. They never patched them on that little area out front of the observation deck. And if you look at the clock area, you'll see countless patches where they patched bullet holes from all the rounds that were being fired there. Now, I put this up here to show you. At that time, when that happened, law enforcement had to change tactics big time. So what they did is they decided, hey, you know what? If we ever have one of these again, we probably need some guys who are armed with rifles, who have some equipment so they can breach into a door, because that was a huge problem. They couldn't get in the door. The doors were huge, like castle-like oak doors. They couldn't get into it. Took them a while to break into it. So it was a result of the UT Tower in '66 and then the Watts riots out in California that you had special weapons and tactics teams that were developed, SWAT teams. So the training became this. If we have another active shooter, the patrol officers, the first guys that are out on the street, they're going to get there. They're going to make a big perimeter around that facility. Nobody's going to get in. Nobody's going to get out. We're going to call the SWAT team. The SWAT team will come in and take care of the problem, right? And it sounds pretty good. And it worked okay until we got to this event. I'm sure you guys remember Columbine, all right? 1999. Now, Columbine was a critical moment for law enforcement training in America, okay? Because like I said, the training worked up till when we got here. In Columbine, you had these two shooters, Klebold and Harris, that went into a school. They ended up killing 15 and wounding 21. All right. They went into the school library. They killed themselves. They're laying on the floor dead, and they were in there for 45 minutes before the first officers entered the building. Now, you had approximately 250 officers that showed up when the 911 calls started going out. 250 officers. That is a huge amount of police officers. And that's from 6 different agencies in that greater Denver metro area. And from those 6 different agencies, you had 6 different SWAT teams that showed up. Still, it was 45 minutes before the first officers entered the building. Now, the reason why that is, guys, is because it takes a SWAT team about, at the minimum, about 45 minutes to get everybody on scene, geared up, and ready to go in that building, okay? Well, the problem was at Columbine, you had people that died during that 45-minute period waiting for those officers to come in the building, even though no other shots were being fired. There were actually kids holding signs up in the windows of the school saying, please hurry, someone is bleeding to death, okay? I've spoken to officers that were there at Columbine, some of the SWAT officers, and they're very emotional about it because it's, they told me straight up, we failed in our mission that day. We failed in our mission to be able to help some of those kids and teachers because we didn't get in there in time. So as a result of Columbine, that we changed the training again. So what we started doing, we developed what's called the ALERT program, the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training Program. And what we do with that is we take the frontline officers, the patrol officers that are out every day, you see them in their cars on the street, and we put them through a little 2-day mini SWAT school, basically, where we teach them breaching tactics, how to get inside of a window or a door, how to move tactically through a building or through an open area, engage the shooter, and then what to do immediately thereafter, okay, to provide medical assistance or whatever the case may be. And this is a program that originated here in Texas, okay, down at Texas State University, and now it's a nationwide program. Well, it works some of the time, okay? But I want you to look at this slide right here. Do you guys remember the Aurora Theater shooting that happened in Colorado back in 2012? Ask yourself, how long did it take the police to get to the movie theater? Okay. Well, I will tell you, the police were already there. The police, there were already police working security jobs that were in the lobby of this movie theater. So the police were on site, but still you had a guy that came in the back door of one of those theaters and killed 12 and wounded 70 people within just a matter of about 60 to 120 seconds. All right. Unacceptable, guys. Unacceptable. And I could go on with a litany of other shootings that have happened where police were right there. If you think about it, it was the shooting that happened at can't remember where it was at. Anyway, I think it wasn't the Nashville shooting. It was the city that was, I think, north of there, where you had a textbook response of police officers that arrived on scene, were able to get in the building and neutralize the shooter, but there were still casualties that happened. Now, this gets me back to my driving point here. The response, the successful response to an active shooter event has to be organic. It has to be from the people that are on site in order to successfully stop the shooter before mass casualties occur. Okay, so that's where you come in. You've got to be ready to take care of yourself and take care of the people around you when this event happens. I'm not bagging on the police, guys. I'm a career police officer, but I can honestly admit to the failures that have happened over the years where people were not protected just because we couldn't get there in time. Okay. All right, so here's some of the things you need to understand. Never assume that your current location is exempt from violence. There is no place, and I'm telling you this in all truthfulness, no place on God's green earth that is exempt from violence. Okay, we've had active shooter events on military bases. Fort Hood has been hit 3 times. Okay, other military bases have had this. We've had active shooters in police departments. Okay, there's no place exempt from violence. Understand you have an obligation for your own safety, and I hope we've already established that. Your safety is your responsibility. And if you have family, especially little kids with you, they are your responsibility. You've got to do everything you can to protect those kids. Understand that people are generally not in a heightened state of awareness about their safety. And what that means is this: you probably don't drive around all the time. You don't drive into your work parking lot or whatever, the grocery store, and sit there and think, hey, you know what? Somebody could try to kill me today. You probably don't. And that's normal, guys. Nobody likes to think about dying today. Okay. But guys, look around you. Understand what's going on in this country right now. We have violence at epidemic levels. Okay. We have shootings in my small community. We had a shooting last week, a shootout in a parking lot of an apartment complex. Normally one of the most quiet little towns, quiet little cities, and we had violence strike. Okay. It can happen anywhere, and you've just got to be aware of your personal safety. Recognize that there are people in crisis around you at times. And what that means is this: a mental health crisis. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard a lot about mental health issues. You know, that gets brought up a lot after these shootings. But I'm going to tell you right now, guys, the mental health system in our nation is broken. Okay? There are not enough treatment facilities. There are not enough doctors and counselors that are out there to effectively treat all the mental illness that we see exhibited in communities all across this nation. Okay. And those people are out there. And I'm not saying every person that is experiencing mental health issues is violent, but some of them are very violent. Okay. And you pass them every day. I guarantee you pass them every day, driving to work, going through the grocery store, the convenience store, whatever the case may be. You've got to be aware of that. And this last one, recognize that there really are people in the world. There's people in the world who would steal from you. I'm sure everybody's had something stolen from them, right? It makes you angry. There's people in the world who would hurt you, and for no other reason, they just want to. And yes, there's people in the world who would kill you for no other reason, they just want to. Okay. Now, I'm not saying all this to make you paranoid, but I am trying to get you to understand that we don't live in Mayberry anymore. Okay. For lack of a better term, we've got to understand that these people are around us every day. And that last little phrase that says, what would I do if? This is what I want you to keep in your minds as you go throughout your day. What would I do if somebody walked into my office or my building or at the grocery store I'm shopping or whatever, my church, and started shooting? What would I do? If you'll play that little game and play it with your spouse, your significant other, your kids even, how would we get out of this building quickly? If I had to take action to defend my family, what would I do? Okay, if you'll start asking yourself those things, programming those responses into your mind. What that does is it actually shaves seconds and milliseconds off of your response time. When we train soldiers and police officers, we drill it into them contingency plans. Okay, what would I do if plans? And what that does is it helps establish reference points in the mind for situations that they may or may not have ever thought about. So that way, when they're encountering it, their mind is not hitting the wheel of death. When when you Google something on your phone, you get that little where it's searching for an answer. We call it the wheel of death. So your mind is not doing that. It'll lock on to some type of reference point. Oh, I've either encountered this or thought about this before. Here's something I need to do. And all this is taking place in a matter of milliseconds, right? So have those reference points already built in your mind. And the best way to do that, to build those reference points, is training. And that's why hands-on training that I do in this is so important, because it reinforces the mental concepts that we talk about. You actually apply it in a hands-on way. So what would I do if? Ask yourself those things as you go throughout your day. All right, now let's get down to your response, okay? What you actually will do. Guys, in an active shooter event, you got to use your senses and your instincts to survive. The primary senses that you're using are your sight and your hearing, okay? You see somebody with a gun walk in, you're hearing gunshots, explosions, whatever the case may be. Guys, don't be the person doing this. Oh, I can't believe this is happening. All right? If you're in that mindset right there, you're already behind the survival curve. You've got to take immediate action. You've got to respond immediately. Don't panic. If you panic, people around you will start panicking, because panic, I can assure you, is contagious. Okay, you've got to keep your wits, your instincts about you. Okay, now let's talk about how we're going to respond. And there's 3 ways that you're going to respond. You can get out, all right? And what that means, get out of the area that the bullets are flying in, all right? Getting out means either breaking a window to get out of the building, running out the door. If it's in an open area, run. Get away from where the shooting's going on. That means completely avoid the situation. If you can't get out, you may have to hide out. And that means getting into a bathroom, office space, whatever the case may be, barricading yourself in, okay, and denying access to you from that shooter. And you may have to take out the shooter, all right? And that means defending yourself with everything you've got. And we're going to talk about each of these in detail. So when we talk about getting out, avoiding the situation, speed and distance are your friends, okay? And what I mean by that is, excuse me, run, Forrest, run, okay? That means hook up and go. If you have to run 5 blocks down the street to get away from that, because bullets will go a long way. This isn't like a fire alarm where you run across the street and wait for the fire department. This is where you run as far as you can to get out of that area. Get out. Shut up and run. What does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it really means. See this little device that we all carry around, okay? When you're trying to get out and get away from that area, that is not the time to be on the phone, even dialing 911. Get to a safe area. And what I mean by a safe area, that means several blocks away, getting away, get behind something hard and heavy that will provide you with cover, and then dial 911. And stay off of Facebook and social media. All right. We've seen it in these active shooter events, horrifically so. The event that happened at the shopping mall a couple of weeks ago, where the shooter had shot a group of kids, a family, and there were people filming the bodies, which was horrific. Okay. So stay off your phone, get to a safe area, call 911, and let them know where you're at and where the shooter is. Okay, if you have to hide out, like I said, that means getting out of the view of the shooter, getting inside that office space, bathroom, classroom, okay? Get inside. If you can lock the door, if your door has a lock on it, lock yourself in, right? Let your buddies get in with you. Don't lock everybody else outside, right? and then barricade. And what barricading means is putting lots of heavy stuff, everything you can find up in front of that door. Now you would ask, why are we doing that, Eric? What's the point of that? Well, the point is buying yourself extra seconds, because as you barricade yourself in, what you're going to do next is actually set up to be able to counterattack that shooter should he make it into your room. Okay. And we're going to talk about that. So once you barricaded yourself in, you're going to set up for the counterattack, shut off the lights, and don't make noise. The reason why we shut off the lights and we don't make noise is because if the shooter thinks that there's nobody home, they're probably not going to waste too much time trying to get in. That shooter knows, even in a addled brain, they know that the first shot that goes off, somebody somewhere is dialing 911. So they know the cavalry is coming and that their time to do this damage is very limited. So if you barricaded yourself in and they have to really work to try to get in somewhere, they're going to go on and try to find an easier target. Okay. So get inside, barricade, shut off the lights, don't make noise, and go from there. Okay. So now let's talk about the counterattack. Now, guys, there's two kinds of people in an active shooter event. There's people who can fight and there's people who can't fight. All right. What I mean by people who can't fight, that would be like small children. Okay. Doesn't mean teenagers, because teenagers can fight. Okay. I've seen them. Had to take down a few of them myself. Teenagers can fight, but I mean little kids. I mean like the extreme elderly, people that are very frail, people that are handicapped, maybe even temporarily handicapped. Maybe somebody had knee surgery or something. Those people may not be able to fight. Okay. Everybody else, they can fight. Now, if we were inside of a room and if we were doing a hands-on, you would be doing all of this hands-on. All right. The people who can fight, once they have barricaded the door, they're going to stack up on the doorknob side of the door against the wall, kind of in a file, and they're all going to squat down. The first person in that stack, the one that's closest to that door, if that person gets inside, if that shooter gets inside, that first person, their whole object of living at that point is to gain control of the weapon that shooter has. And like I say, if we were doing hands-on, I would show you exactly how to do that. Okay, whether it's a long gun, handgun, whatever the case may be. Everybody else is going to go after the shooter themselves. They're going to target the shooter. They're going to go after primarily the eyes and the throat on that shooter. The eyes, because if a person can't see, they can't target you very easily. The throat, if a person can't breathe, they're not going to be able to effectively fight. Okay. And like I say, if we were doing the hands-on, I would show you that, but I'm just giving you the overview of what we're doing here. Those people who cannot fight, if you had small kids in the room or the elderly or the handicapped, whatever, they're going to be in that hard corner behind all those people that are stacked up for the counterattack. Okay. They're not going to be out somewhere in the room. Nobody is out in the rest of the room. Okay. Because bullets will go through walls, bullets will go through doors. So if you're out in the room somewhere, you're downrange. And the reason why everybody in the counterattack squats down is because by squatting down, you are now 50% of the target that you just were when you were standing up. The people who can't fight, they're not squatting down, they're laying down, they're belly down on the floor. Okay, so low that they're digging holes in the carpet with their buttons, right? That's how low you want them. All right. So we take down the shooter, we stop the killing. Now,
So
once
Eric,
yes, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. So another question has come in that I was going to share with you. So what is your opinion on upper management with a license to carry, having the ability to carry at work?
I'm very much for that. Okay. And like I said, because it's the organic response, the people that are right there on scene who are in the most favorable position to be able to stop this event before it becomes a mass casualty event. I've trained a lot of different management, school teachers, and principals in the Guardian program to carry on their facility or at their facility. So I'm very much in favor of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so once we get that shooter down, so say we've We've taken them down. We've got to secure the shooter and the weapon. What I mean by securing the weapon specifically is removing the weapon from the shooter. That shooter should not have access to any weapons at all, okay? And that doesn't mean picking up the weapon, unloading it, and, stuffing it down your pants. That's not what that means. What that means is just removing it from him, okay? Now think about this. Remember how I told you that if there's one shooter, you should always assume that there's another, right? What do you have now if you've taken the gun from that shooter? If you don't have any other weapons, what do you have in your hand now? You've got a weapon. Can you use that to defend yourself? You could, okay? I've had people tell me, well, that's evidence now, right? It's evidence after we finish using it, okay? If you have to use the bad guy's gun to defend yourself against another bad guy until we can get the situation resolved, then by all means, do what you have to do to defend your life, okay? When we say secure the shooter, guys, that means tie the shooter up, tie his hands behind his back, okay? So he can't fight, he can't access any other weapon system. Use whatever you got. If you got a lamp cord, a necktie, belt, whatever it is, tie his hands up behind his back so he cannot move, okay? And secure the room. And what that means is, if this guy is breached inside of the door, there's a hole right there that somebody else can get through, right? So secure the room either by shutting the door again and rebarricading, or posting somebody in that gap to be on the lookout for either another shooter, or they are also acting as the first liaison with the law enforcement officers that are going to be coming into that facility, okay? And then, of course, in the meantime, we need to stop the dying. If you've had people shot, you have got to get on those people that are hurt immediately. Get them into another room, a secure area, and start doing your medical on them. And that's the other thing I want to point out. Not only do you need the training for Stop the Bleed, you need to have the Stop the Bleed kits that contain tourniquets, the dressings and stuff like that, that you will need to stop the bleeding, all right? So if anybody has any questions on that, you can certainly ask me. Now, what happens if the active shooter happens in another building that's nearby you, okay? So maybe there's 2 buildings down from us, 2 businesses down from us where it happens. We get notified somehow, maybe somebody ran inside, hey, there's somebody shooting 2 doors down. What are we going to do here? Guys, lock your facility down. Now, in a facility, especially like here, there's multiple layers. You have the external doors that are normally locked, okay? Somebody might need a key card or an ID card or whatever to access the building. So lock those, make sure those doors are locked, but don't rely on just the outside door. You still need to get into an interior office space, bathroom, something like that, and barricade yourself in, just like we talked about. Speaking of bathrooms, I want to point this out. There's not a lot of stuff in a bathroom to barricade with, okay? Maybe a trash can, not going to help too much. So if you're inside of a room like that, or maybe it's a room where there's no lock on the door, you can actually use yourself to barricade. And what you can do is lay down on the floor, belly down on the floor, and put your feet up against the door, okay? That in and of itself is enough of a barricade to keep somebody from necessarily pushing into that room. If you've got 2 or 3 people that are doing that, you're going to be able to hold that door. Is it the best option? It's not the best option, but it will work if you need to. So once you get inside, barricade yourselves in those internal rooms and just wait the situation out. Wait until an all clear is given. You're going to be probably monitoring social media, local media, whatever the case may be. Now, if you're caught in an open area, okay, open areas are dangerous. Somebody's shooting in them, like a big parking lot. If you're caught in a parking lot or an open area like that and somebody's shooting, you need to run. All right, run, Forrest, run. And as you're running, look for cover. Okay, and what do I mean by cover? Cover is something that's hard and heavy that will stop bullets. All right, if you're in a parking lot, there's a lot of cars, right? Guys, bullets will go through most parts of a car. Okay, I've shot a couple of cars in my career and bullets go right through them, even handgun bullets, because they're made out of thin little fiberglass and sheet metal, right? but there's a couple of parts of that car that bullets will not penetrate, and that would be the engine block and the wheel wells, where you've got the heavy axle and the wheels. If you've got to use a car for cover, put that engine block or those wheels between you and where that shooter is coming from, or the shooting is coming from. Otherwise, run until you can find some cover. All right. People have asked me, well, Eric, should I zigzag? Don't worry about zigzagging. Guys, if any of you are hunters or been in combat before or anything like that, hitting a moving target is not easy. Okay. Pick your next point of cover and run straight to it. The quickest way from point A to point B is a straight line. So run to the next point of cover and warn others. If there's people coming into the area that you're running out of because of this, warn them. Some people walk around in what we call condition white, which means they're just oblivious to what's going on around them. Maybe they're plugged into the phone or they're just thinking about other things. They don't realize that there's shooting going on. Some may not even understand what a real gunshot sounds like because they're so used to what a TV gunshot is. There's a big difference. So warn others that are coming in the area that you're leaving and get them going. Okay. All right. Now, once you get to that safe area, that point of cover, you're going to want to get on the phone with 911. Guys, the most important thing the 911 dispatcher needs to know is where is that shooter at right now? Where's the shooting going on at? They may not need to send officers to you if you're 5 blocks down the street, behind the dumpster. We'll get to you, but we need to get those officers right to the point of where that shooting's going on. So give them all the information, description of the shooter, the place where you last saw him at. That kind of information is incredibly pertinent and vital to those responding officers. When you meet those officers, guys, the big thing is maybe you've got your weapon on you if you're a concealed carrier, whatever the case may be. Once you meet the officers, you need to holster that weapon and show your empty open hands. Okay, that's very important. Those officers coming into that area, they may not know who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. So don't show a threat to them. Either put the weapon down, holster it up, and show your empty open hands. Follow their commands. No worries. You might get handcuffed. Don't worry about it. We will sort that out later. Okay. But just follow their commands at that point. No worries. Don't get in the officers' way, in their way. Don't touch the officers. Okay. Now, most adults aren't going to do that, right? But with little kids love police officers, and they will come up and I've had kids just come up and give me a hug, totally out of the blue. So teach your kids, ask the police officer before you touch them. Okay. Because those guys have a job to do. And if they're moving into that area to take care, make sure there's no other threats. You don't want to have kids running up, getting in their way, that kind of thing. And like I say, always show your empty open hands. No big deal. When the police arrive, you're probably going to be searched. If you were at ground zero where the shooting happened, you're probably going to get searched. So if you do have your weapon on you, tell that officer, hey, yeah, I'm a concealed handgun carrier. It's in my right pocket, whatever the case may be, just let them know. You're probably going to get told to help. If this is a mass casualty event where there's wounded people, we need your help. And that's why I say stop the bleed is so important, to be able to take care of those casualties until we can get EMS into the scene, because EMS will not come into that scene until law enforcement has cleared it to make sure there's no other existing threats. You'll be evacuated. It may take a little while, but you're going to get evacuated. So what I encourage people to do, if you're in an office building environment, something like that, is to have some water, have some snacks that are in your, in probably in each room, really, in case you have to barricade in that room. So everybody has a little bit of something, in case they're there for a while. You're going to get interviewed. Those investigators are going to come in. Hey, what did you see? What did you hear? You might have to write a statement. No big deal. Okay. That's just part of the investigation. And guys, that's about all I have for the general PowerPoint. Guys, do I have any questions? Are there any concerns that any of you have?
So Eric, we have received lots of questions about having you potentially out to do the hands-on training. I participated in the hands-on training with Eric a couple weeks ago, like he mentioned, and I will say it is absolutely superb, and I do highly recommend it for organizations, for your employees to participate in. Many of you have asked for his contact information as well. Here it is on the screen. This is his cell phone, I believe. I do believe this email is this email wrong?
I need to change that. I don't have that email anymore, guys. So Elizabeth has my email. If you need my email, get with her. That telephone number, you can text me. That's the best way to get a hold of me on it, is just shoot me a text. Tell me who you are and that you're interested in that training. Or if you call, please leave a message. But yeah, that's the best way.
Yes, and I will be sharing this recording with each of you. So if you feel there's value in sharing this internally with some of your leadership staff that was unable to attend today, you will have the link to do that. And I will, of course, as well be sending an email that is up to date for Eric, as well as his cell phone and everything in an email follow-up. So we'll take a couple more minutes for any questions if anyone wants to send those via the chat box. And I hope you found this to be very beneficial. There was questions about the Stop the Bleed, Eric, and where that takes place. And that's something that you can come out and do on site at someone's organization. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Very
Is evaluating someone's office space something that you can do as well?
I do that as well. I do security assessments on facilities as well.
Okay. Perfect. And I know sometimes questions come to you after you've logged off, so feel free, you can shoot me an email and I can get that question over to Eric and we can continue the conversation. What if the legal ramifications of management, what is the legal ramifications of management stopping a shooter?
Well, here's the deal. Texas law gives the ability and the authority of someone to not only defend themselves, but defend a third party, other people, against somebody who is either threatening or conducting violence that would cause serious bodily injury or death. So you're covered by state law in defending yourself and somebody else. As far as liability and things like that, that a lot of people have questions on, that is something that you need to talk to your organization's attorney about. That's something that you're going to have to look at as far as writing your operating procedures and how you want to conduct that. But you're covered by state law as far as defending yourself and other people around you from that deadly force or that threat of deadly force.
Many people are saying thank you for the valuable training and your time. So
absolutely,
those are coming in as well. Okay, well, I appreciate everyone's time. We're going to go ahead and wrap up and be on the lookout this week for that follow-up email with the link to the recording as well as Eric's contact information. So
awesome.
Thank you
guys. Thank you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate being here today.
Thanks for joining us.
All right. Y'all take care.
Bye. Bye.